Naini, can you just check once?
Yeah, we're live. I
Oh,
can see you on screen, Malone.
all right. Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to our speakers and audience. Thank you very much for joining us today. Before we start, I want to thank the people behind the conference. STEM4elle, an organization led by Naini Modugula with a mission to introduce young girls to STEM. Next is Women of Bits, an initiative by Bitsian girls across the three BITS campuses. The aim of this organization is to highlight the success journeys of Bitsian women and spread awareness about opportunities. Our third collaborator for the conference is BITS Goa Women in Tech. They are a community in BITS Goa whose aim is to provide guidance for networking, discovering, and sharing the right opportunities. They also aim to create a safe space for conversation and mentorship. We also want to thank Ms. Hema Radhakrishna for her valuable inputs for the conference. I want to thank all the curious minds in the audience for showing interest in the conference and showering us with worthwhile questions. We have tried our best to include all your questions in today's event. Nonetheless, if we miss out on something, please ask your questions in the Google form given in the description. Today, we have gathered to learn about the journeys of Bitsian women in STEM and how they have paved their way to success in their respective fields. Our first panel is with Ms. Ankita Vijayvargiya, Ms. Lula Mohanty, and Ms. Rashmi Barve, and we will talk about leadership. We will focus on what leadership and entrepreneurship means to them, how they reach the esteemed positions they are currently in, the lessons they learned on the way up, and what are the things we as youngsters can imbibe to pave our way to success. Our second panel is about tech. We will talk about how Miss Miriam Daniel, Miss Maitri Ganapati, and Miss Reva Modi made it big in tech. We will learn about what is it in the field that excites them every day, what difficulties they faced in their journey, the lessons they learned, and some advice for the young people in the audience wanting to pursue tech. We will start our conference with a few words on sustainability and tech by Ms. Divya Nawale. She is a mechanical engineer from BITS Pilani from the batch of 2007. Extremely passionate about sustainability, she is currently working with the Asian Development Bank at this intersection of technology, policy, and finance for clean energy programs across Southeast Asia. A fun fact about her, she has been to all 7 continents. Yes, you heard me right. She has stepped on Antarctica and was the youngest Indian woman on record to do so till 2009. And on that note, I'll hand it over to Ms. Divya Nawale to talk about her journey and thoughts on sustainability.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Melanie, for a wonderful welcome. And I'm really excited to be here and share a little bit of my journey. I know in the audience there are a lot of Bitsian women as well, and high school women. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey, and in the process also talk about how technology really helped me reach where I'm at today. So I think as was mentioned, yes, I've been to Antarctica twice, in fact, and really I wanted to kind of make my story in a way that really what it should be. Really, it was about going from BITS Pilani to Antarctica. I'm a 2003 batch from Pilani campus, and I graduated in 2007. And my story actually starts here. This is the lecture theatre complex, or FD5, in BITS Pilani campus. And the interesting part is that when I was in my third year, it so happened that a Bitsian actually, who had been to Antarctica in one of the expeditions where he conducted experiments on solar energy in Antarctica, came as a part of his Silver Jubilee reunion and did a presentation. I looked at that and I thought, wow, he's a Bitsian, I'm a Bitsian. If he's an engineer and I'm an engineer and I can go, then if he can go there, then I can go there too. So really the dream was to go back to Pilani at my own 25-year reunion and be able to give a presentation of going to Antarctica or something like that. But who knew that actually that very day, I set something into motion in my life, which took me just literally 3 years later on an expedition to one of the most pristine places on the planet, known as the last wilderness on Earth. We know less about Antarctica and our oceans than we know about Mars at this point, or the moon, in fact. And the life-changing moment that took me there at a young age of 22 was that it was all about passion. I went thinking that it's all about saving the planet, but came back realizing that it's actually all about leveraging the right technologies for good. So tech for good is something that we all talk about these days. That's really what this is all about. First thing I did when I actually was on the expedition, on the ship itself, was do a carbon footprint exercise. So really measure that what is my impact on the planet right now. And that is basically nothing but science and engineering and technology. And the fact is that what gets measured gets done. So the idea that climate change was a science problem, but the fact that it wasn't being communicated properly is what was my biggest takeaway and life-changing moment on the expedition. And to talk a little bit about Antarctica, it's actually the fifth largest continent. It's bigger than Australia, bigger than Europe. Just to give you an idea of how big the continent is, that's just the state of Texas, which is the largest state in the United States, just superimposed over a small part of the continent. And it literally, the closest point, the coast to the South Pole is 900 miles long. And interestingly, there is a joke that, you make a fist, and this is that finger of Antarctica, right? Like the thumb. So I actually have been to the thumb of Antarctica, and this is called the Antarctic Peninsula as well. It comes from the side of Argentina, South America. I had the opportunity to join an expedition called the International Antarctic Treaty Expedition in 2009, and I'll tell you in a little bit shortly why this is really important. So my journey started in Ushuaia, Argentina, which is the southernmost city in the world. And it took me down south to the last continent on the planet. But it's not easy getting there. Antarctica is literally the most peaceful place on the planet. Like, there's absolutely no civilization there. It's literally, you can hear your thoughts. It's that peaceful. But to get there, you have to cross something called the Drake Passage, which is where the ocean currents of Atlantic and the Pacific meet. And really, it's the most turbulent ocean in the world. Even in the Navy field, it's considered like the big thing, like if you have crossed the Drake. And I have survived it 4 times now, going back and forth. And I truly believe that, there's really balance in the universe where you have to rough it out in the sea to reach the most beautiful place on the planet, which truly is an example of how humanity can come together. The reason why the Antarctic Treaty that I mentioned earlier is so important is because it makes Antarctica the only one place which belongs to each and every one of us. No country controls it. There are no borders. There are no borders like aligned around it. It's truly the most peaceful place left on our planet. And it is protected by the Antarctic Treaty. So it only allows for scientific and other peaceful purposes. Tourism is also a part of the process, but the expedition that I went on was with the 2041 Foundation, which is an educational awareness program, and takes not just young people, but also people who are like sustainability leaders from across the world. And why 2041? Because in the year 2041, the protocol on environmental protection for the Antarctic Treaty could potentially be modified. And so the 2041 Foundation organizes this yearly expeditions so that they can take people down there to inspire them and make them champions who can then take actions in the real world back home in policy and sustainable business and technology. And so this is a part of the this is what the expedition looks like. This is how big the family is. This was from my 2018 expedition. You can see me right here. And I truly have had the opportunity to see Antarctica 8 years apart. And I can tell you how different it was. The ice is definitely melting. You can see that there is a difference in how climate has impacted even the last place on the planet, which is really ironic, given that there's no human activity there. There's least human activity there, and yet it gets impacted the most. I won't talk about it much, but look up ozone hole. It's over Antarctica for a reason. It's because of the polar currents and everything that happens in our world. Really, is not because of something that happened where you are, but actually something happened in the Arctic or Antarctic. So we really need to understand that we are a single ecosystem, a single planet, and that every place gets impacted in different ways. But if we can essentially use technologies to make the planet a better place, then the perfect example for that is in Antarctica. Antarctica is the coldest, driest, and windiest place on the planet. It really cannot sustain human life so much, right? Because of what the weather is like. But really, if you can set up like an education base that 2041 has set up there, which runs entirely on 100% renewable energy, if it can be done in Antarctica, it can be done anywhere in the world. And so through my work over the years, I've had the opportunity to work directly with 2041 Foundation and had the opportunity to even work on an expedition, making an expedition entirely carbon neutral. So that's, again, all the science and tech and data that I, as an engineer, have been able to use my knowledge to be able to do better for the planet. And how I did this is really 3 large career transitions. In my early 20s, I was basically an engineer and I didn't know what to do with my life. Mid-20s, I tried a number of things. I worked at NGOs at the grassroots level. I worked in the corporate sector. I worked briefly in the startup space as well. But it wasn't until my late 20s when I finally realized that I wanted to work in climate policy, and that was my main focus. But I also wanted to combine my skills learned till then, which was basically in technology, right? So I wanted to combine technology and policy, and I knew that finance was another key driver. So I actually set out to learn finance and policy in my late 20s, in fact. And truly, that is the reason why I'm here today, because I want to talk about how actually technology might just be a small part of what I'm doing, but it helps me in decision making and providing strategies for decision making to people who can really make a difference in the planet. Especially sustainability and climate careers require all kinds of skills. Like I mentioned, science is not just about like research, but also communicating it. And so you really need to learn it, marketing and communications, but also look at what's really working together. So truly, I think how we can make climate as like a career is basically understand that we have to work in a way that software, engineering, science, everything has to drive everything else. Policy is always playing catch up with technology, and this really needs to change. So when we look at projects, it's not just about if it's technologically possible and economically recoverable, but also it has to be politically possible. But for that political will to happen, the technology needs to move first. And so really, technology is the key driver for everything that happens in the world. And currently, I'm working with the Asian Development Bank, as I mentioned, and this is where I have reached at. I have been able to combine technology, policy, and finance in the process. And I'm also working especially on initiatives even at the grassroots level today. But the idea is that it's always driven by saying that, how can we make better decisions for the planet? And the fact is that we have less than 10 years left at this point. And those who may be aware that there is something called as a Paris Agreement, it talks about keeping our world's temperature rise below the 2 degrees Celsius mark, and ideally keep it to 1.5 degrees Celsius rise. And we've already reached currently at even at 2020, I would say this is an outdated graph. We've already reached here where we have crossed 1.2 degrees Celsius. But we need to ensure that we do not cross any more of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere so that we can basically flatten the climate curve. And the UN has clearly said that we have less than 10 years left. So before 2030, we need dire actions to happen. And the fact is that I truly believe that it will be women who save the world, who really will actually make this difference happen. Among the top 5 solutions to climate change identified by multiple lists in the UN or Project Drawdown or Population Matters, you take any list and it will tell you that women empowerment is absolutely one of the top 5 solutions to climate change, along with so many other aspects that women can, think about it. Like who basically buys the, groceries and like the cleaning stuff at home. All that can be made eco-friendly just by the decision of the women of the house. It's truly the women who are always doing more recycling. They're always the ones trying to conserve water and always trying to turn off electric appliances. So truly, I believe that women and all of us will save the world. And I really want to drive this message that my mentor, Robert Swan, has always taught us, that the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. It's really not up to anybody else, but each one of us together. So I truly believe that technology is the driver for all this. But if you really want to build a career, especially in sustainability and climate change, use technology and go out in the world and create those amazing things that needs to be done in order to save the planet. And it has to be you. It can't be anyone else. No one is coming to save but us. And on that note, I want to provide a little bit about the information that I want to share about a course that I have started basically based on pursuing sustainability careers, and which essentially talks about how you can combine your passion and your pain to truly work in the climate space. A green job doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sit and do data analysis, but it could also mean that you're doing a fashion startup, and even the fashion startup requires a lot of logical and analytical mindset, and all that is a part of saving the planet. So what's different in this course is basically it's not just textbook definitions, but you actually understand climate science and work on exercises where you able to approach climate action with a sense of optimism and inspiration, even if there's news out there that tells you every day that it's doom and gloom and the world is coming to an end. That's not how we work on climate change. We truly have to work in a way that we can inspire each other. And if there's anyone on the call listening today who thinks they want to go to Antarctica, I would love to help you. The next expedition that 2041 has is going to happen in March 2022. So please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you and help you get on that expedition to Antarctica. And please remember that the world needs us. The world needs you. Don't ask what the world needs, but ask what makes you come alive and do it. Because what the world truly needs is people who have come alive. And so that we can really go out there and use our technology or any kind of background to truly be able to make the planet a better place. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you, womenofbits, for this opportunity today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Divya. These words were very inspiring. I'm sure after this talk, I am going to take steps towards making my own household more sustainable and do my bit towards the environment. Thank you so much for joining us today. Next, we will have the Lead and Inspire panel, which will be hosted by Naini. I'm very curious about the panelist journey. So without any delay, I will hand it over to Naini to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Melanie. Hello, everyone. Together, let's make the next 30 minutes insightful and engaging. Though we aren't meeting in person, it's our pleasure to be surrounded by such amazing and talented women. We have Ankita Vijayvargya from the BITS 2006 batch, the founder of naturehealers.life, an app that helps people move towards a more sustainable lifestyle. Lula Mohanty, General Manager at IBM from BITS 90 batch, and Rashmi Badwe from BITS 90 batch, who's the Head of Operation and Customer Services at TIAA Financial Solutions, a Fortune 100 financial services organization. Thank you for being here with us today. So if all the panel members can switch on their video. Hello. Or any kind of background to truly be able to. So to start off, Rashmi, how did you reach your current role?
So much, Ms. Divya.
Okay, so let me start a little bit by telling everyone, my journey so far. As you mentioned, I studied at Pilani. I studied physics and engineering. So that was my start. And then after BITS, I actually went into technology, did coding. That was my first job, as I'm sure many folks in the call are experienced with. But then I came to the US and did my MBA in finance, and that was a big shift for me. And after that, I spent, the rest of my career has been in financial services. But I will tell you, I have done a lot of different things within financial services. So I've managed sales, for example, I've done strategy roles, I've managed operational teams, and I've also been in insurance and banking and brokerage and retirement. So seen quite the spectrum of financial services. So, lots of twists and turns, Nani, is what I would say. And if you'd ask me, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to tell you where I would end up. And I can't tell you where I will end up 10 years from now. I just hope it's going to be something interesting. But I will tell you there are two themes in my career that have stood out for me and that have helped me get to where I am. One is I feel my education and early career in STEM has given me a core and foundational skill set that I use to this day. So things like logical thinking, analytical skills, problem solving, I learned all of those. Now, I'm at the point in my career where I don't have to actually do the analysis in a spreadsheet anymore, but I know how to use data and technology to solve business problems. So I still feel those skills are very, very relevant 25 years later for me. And then the second big theme for me, by the way, has been I've just never been afraid to go get out of my comfort zone, try something different. I've often taken roles where I had no experience in that particular area. And that really means you'll probably fail a little bit. You're risking that, but that's okay. That's how you learn and grow. So that's been my journey and the two things that I think have stood out for me.
Thank you. Now, Lula, how is your journey to your current position at IBM?
Well, I think like everyone else, after I graduated from Pilani, I was just very happy to have a job. It was a very proud moment for me when I was writing, or I had my first salary check. It was enough to be independent. But look, as I was going through my initial job, which was actually writing an application for a non-banking financial company at that point in time, I realized that I knew to tell a story very well. I mean, maybe it was my upbringing, the perspectives I had, the exposure. I really liked spending more time with clients and listening to their problem statements. So I decided to make that career shift. I joined PricewaterhouseCoopers for management consulting. That was a life-changing stint because my wish was granted. I was spending a lot of time with clients. But it is also where I started to build my corporate anchor because, again, it was a profession where we didn't have many men at that time. So I could, I learned to pick my battles. I learned to create space for myself. I learned to, speak for myself. And so in many ways, that was character building for me. And then PricewaterhouseCoopers gave me a lot of insight into many, many industries, with oil and gas, discrete manufacturing, banking, financial services. I worked extremely hard. I was focused, and I knew that I was focused on things I could control, actually, right? And not worry about a lot of the other things that was going on around me. Rashmi mentioned because you had a tech background, when ERP came along, right? I was one of the first people to raise my hands, and I went into SAP consulting, did a lot of that. That job took me, I spent a lot of time in Europe and in North America doing this work. It all happened to be in the high-tech industry space. So then I decided to major in the high-tech industry. And again, it was very unconventional. My peers, my colleagues were still doing projects. But I said I want to become a subject matter expert on in that industry. So I kind of then went on, traveled a lot, to Japan, to Europe, and did all of that. In that process, I had a chance. By the time PwC was already acquired by IBM, so I had a new company. I met people like Lou Gersner in those days, very early days, and I had the chance to see Ginny Rometty actually make her way through the organization. Somewhere in my subconscious, she became a role model, that kind. But I learned to say yes a lot more than no, right? So somewhere in this middle, while I was traveling around the world. I was building my corporate anchor. I was building my coping mechanisms at home because travel kept me outside. So how do you build that support system, the network and stuff like that? I found myself, as the more I said yes, the more exposure I got. Okay. So I found myself suddenly doing a similar conversation, STEM4elle in North Africa. I found myself being a part of a delegation accompanying, accomplished Indian women in Paris and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I did that stint. I came back. Again, I said yes to an opportunity to set up IBM in the Philippines. I was probably in my mid 30s, or a little shy of my 40s, but here I was in a new country trying to set up operations. Again, a really different experience. And then a variety of other jobs, and now I'm here running IBM for Asia Pacific. I mean, it involves a lot of cultures from India to ASEAN to Australia, New Zealand, Greater China Group, Korea. I manage a number of executives, a lot of frontline sales, and a lot of clients. So, I mean, that's really been my journey. And I think, like I said, staying very focused, staying very flexible. Rashmi said it, saying yes to the difficult jobs. That became a brand for me. I think many a times a lot of these opportunities would not have come to people, but you started to realize that if it's a tough one, and if it's slightly unconventional, they came to me. So that's how I've reached here.
Thank you, Divya. Now, Ankita, how has your trek to founding naturehealers.life been like?
I have to say, first of all, that I'm simply humbled being in the presence of Rashmi and Lula, the likes of them. The kind of things you both have accomplished, I think it's very, very inspiring. Yeah, so to the question of how my trek, as you say, Nayani, has been to founding naturehealers.life, I think it has just been about taking one step at a time during my career and what felt the right step at that time for me. So after graduation, I think I was in the same boat as Lula was. Got a job, was really happy. Didn't really care about what that job was, but then when I went into it, I really started liking it. So I did software development for some time. I'm a computer science graduate, but then very quickly moved to consulting and spent a lot of time in consulting. Um, Learned a lot, of course. Very similar lifestyle as Lula had, and but then at some point of time, I started thinking, okay, what is the next step? Maybe the next step should be getting a second degree. I think that's something that everybody who is at that age thinks about. And I think the organic second degree for me was an MBA. So I went to London Business School to get my MBA. And then after that, I joined a very high growth startup, a tech startup, a multinational company who were setting up their operations in India, and they wanted somebody to set up their India business and customer success. So I joined them. That was a very exciting stint for me, learned a lot. But then fast forward to when COVID hit last year. And that actually made me question a lot of the things that, how am I really spending my time as? So I took a sabbatical from my job, and I started helping out and working with other tech COVID warriors to give out free COVID consultations to people across India. And this is a time when we are talking about when the government hadn't figured out what to do. So it was all really upon the citizens to do what we can for the other people around us. So once that was done a few months, then I really didn't want to go back to my corporate job. And I always knew actually that sustainability and climate change is going to be my second career. And I think the only question I asked myself at that time was, why not now? And with that, I just jumped into it. I quit my job. I started researching on where we are as a society in sustainability and climate change and where we should be. And a very natural coming idea, I would say natural for me, because I've like throughout this time, throughout my career, I've had several stints with startups, with technology, with social media firms, etc. And it came very naturally to me that the one thing missing from the recipe right now in terms of sustainability and climate change is user engagement and gamification. So that's how the idea of naturehealers.life was born. And we are a team of 16 people now. We are all building naturehealers.life. And as you said, we are helping people move towards a more and more sustainable lifestyle, taking just one little step at a time. And we have gamified that entire journey for everybody. And it's very exciting, very exciting. I think, yeah, I'll keep it at that. Otherwise, I can just go on talking about it. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, Ankita. Rashmi, what does your position entail and what excites you about it?
Okay, so that's an interesting one because I have an organization or a team that's about 1,800 people, different parts, 11, 12 locations across the globe. So a lot of my job, well, I'd say about 30% maybe, is spent on ensuring the day to day is running fine. We're serving our clients, we're delivering on our services, we're doing that well. But the balance 60, 70% is really thinking about what should we do in the future? And it could be things like which business do we want to grow? Which client segments do we want to prioritize? And which customers do we want to serve? It could be what products and services make the most sense to build for our company and our needs. It could be understanding what's happening in the fintech space and should we look at joint ventures and partnership opportunities. So in many ways, it's the doing the planning for those ideas, being able to communicate and get others to agree to ideas I may have, figuring out how many people we would need to make it make it happen, and then actually making it happen. So that's a large part of my job. And I will tell you, every company and industry, all the new opportunities that are coming up through data and technology. Like it's transforming every company and every industry. So it's a huge driver of change. And for me, many days it feels like we're trying to change the tires on the car while the car is still being driven on the road, right? So that's the part that makes it challenging, but it's also the part that makes it most exciting.
Thanks a lot for that insightful response, Rashmi. Now, Lula, what has been the most significant barrier in your career and how did you overcome it?
Well, I won't say it's, I won't call it a barrier, but let me talk about things I struggle with the most. Yeah. So, the first one would be inclusion. Okay. I mean, it is something that I feel very passionately about. So I feel, I mean, it's a very cliched saying when people talk about, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. But I really believe that at every level, what I have strived to ensure is that not only are you participating in what's going on around you, but also have a point of view, have a seat at the table, and also be heard. So I think that's one big ticket item that everybody right around should ensure it happens, because diversity to me is easier. Feeling included is the toughest part, right? And I think that's something you have to make it a habit to ask for it and claim it, right? The second one, personally for me, is to uh, embrace failure positively. Easier said than done, right? But people say that don't think failure is the opposite of success. Failure is a part of success. But the more you grow in an organization, the harder it is for you to accept that, come to peace with it, and move on. But I think it is such a fundamental part today of who you are, because I think I am richer today by taking on the roles I did and failing in those, because failure teaches you a lot more, right? I mean, failure actually gives you a very different perspective on success also. So I think to me that's been another one that I constantly try, and I'm still trying to master, because I mean, these days, jobs or whatever you do, careers are going to be a lot more complex, and nobody knows it all. So you've got to embrace more risks and deal with what comes along with with failure. And I think, to me, I think particularly those two are the areas that I have always spoken about, been very vocal about. And the third thing, which is probably a very personality driven, is how much can you make out of your network. You see probably your colleagues and peers access their network, leverage their network a lot more, get sponsorships out of their network a lot more. I actually have been I think I have work to do there. That's how I would put it. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, it's been a great run so far.
Ankita, as an entrepreneur, what were the challenges you faced?
I think the challenges have been before I became an entrepreneur. And the major challenge has been the mental barriers in my own mind because I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. I always thought that I can. So there is a way in which we understand a framework in entrepreneurship, which is how do you scale a business. So there is a scale of 0 to 1, which is are you being able to build something from scratch, bring it to 1. Then there is a scale from 1 to 10, which is are you being able to scale the business. Then there are scales from 10 to 100 and 100 to 1000. I always thought of myself as somebody being a 1 to 10 or a 10 to 100 because I always thought the 0 to 1 is extremely difficult to do. But then when I got this opportunity and I started actually thinking about, okay, if I really have to solve this problem, can I think about this more like a project rather than building a company? And that just, just melted down all the barriers in my mind. And then things started becoming much easier. So, okay, the things I started thinking about was, okay, what is the next step that I want to do? What is the next tiny step that I want to do if I want to get this project up and running, just like I did in my previous job? And I think that was the biggest challenge that I had to overcome. But now that I know that this has been a challenge and this is how it is overcome, I'm being able to help everybody on my team overcome it. And I think that's a great thing.
Thanks a lot, Ankita. That's very inspiring. Moving on to the next question. What's the one thing you wish you'd known earlier in your career? Rashmi, could we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So, I'll start with a short kind of story. This was very early in my career, first few years. I was invited to join an important project that we were undertaking. It was, very strategic. How do we grow the business? And I was thrilled. I was super excited to be part of this team. It was a very small group, 10 to 12 people. And I couldn't have been more thrilled and excited about it. But, Ankita mentioned mental blocks, and I had a couple of mental blocks at that point in time. And I went into this with two things in mind. I walked into the room, like I said, it was 10 to 12 people. There was only one other woman in the room besides me. And she had known the rest of the team there for years. And I was a complete newbie. Okay. So that was at the back of my mind. The second thing that was at the back of my mind was, well, I'm so young, I'm so early in my career. My job here is going to be simply to listen and learn. So I wasn't thinking about actively contributing, right? And then after 2 sessions, the team came to me and they said, you're off the project. And I was just shocked and stunned. And obviously very highly disappointed, but it was a wake-up call. You learn so much from your failures. Lula mentioned that. This was a wake-up call for me. And so what I would advise everyone starting, a new job, a new project, a new assignment is focus on the things you can control. There will be things around you that you can't, whether you're the only woman at the table, right? Expectations, your level of knowledge, your level of experience coming in. These are all variables you cannot change. They are what they are. So control on what you can do, which is work hard, be extra prepared, be willing to speak up and say what you think is important, but most importantly, do it in a way where you're trying to make a difference. And if you do that, then all these other things over time, I believe, take care of themselves.
Thanks a lot, Rashmi. That's wonderful advice for all of us. And now coming on to Ankita, how about you? What was the advice you would give to your younger self?
Okay, I really thought you were going to go to Lula first, so okay. Advice to my younger self. I think one of the things that I really wish I had known earlier, which would have, melted the mental blocks much earlier, was that I'm going to have multiple careers. And I think this is something that I read a book recently, which is called The 100-Year Life. And I think this applies so much more to you guys, Gen Z, than to us, because all of you are going to have at least 100-year-old life, given the advances in medical sciences, given everything that is happening right now, genetics and everything. And within that 100-year life, you cannot really expect yourself to be doing the same exact thing for the 50 years, 70 years, 80 years of your career. And moreover, what I'm seeing now is that even with my generation, careers have started to reduce to a decade or two before people start switching to entirely new things. And that's the same thing that happened with me. I dropped off of a corporate job at the 10-year mark, and I am now into climate change and sustainability. That's something I'm really, really passionate about. But I don't know what I'm going to be passionate about, let's say 10 years from now. It could be anything, could be Buddhism. But what that means is that if I had known this earlier, I wouldn't have been so worried, or I wouldn't have been so um, concerned about, I have to get my career path right now. And although it did not really affect me so much, because um, the one advice that I always got from my parents was that it's okay, you don't know what's going to happen 5 years down the line. Just focus on today and do what is best for you today. But this concept and just knowing that this is what is happening to the world, that people have multiple careers instead of just a single career, like my dad had, I think that is something that I would tell my younger self. Don't worry, it's all going to be fine. You'll do what you love eventually.
Thank you, Ankita. Now we'll be moving on to the audience questions. So the first one is for Lula. Why are there fewer women in STEM and top universities? Girls want a minority through school. So why does this trend change as we go higher up?
It's an interesting debate, actually, guys. I was having with my family, my teenage son, actually, today as I was coming back from a drive, right? I think two factors. Um, the business case for STEM, or what STEM actually entails, is not widely known. STEM is so pervasive. Naini, if you would have asked me the question, what would I have advised myself? I wish I knew it was so pervasive. I would have paid more attention to all these courses we did in BITS. Remember, introduction to psychology, management, because today, whatever I touch has an application of STEM, right? I mean, I picked up something called semiotics, which is just a study of symbols, and then I went into some algorithmic madness into it. So I guess first and foremost, the fact that STEM can apply itself to so many things. Today I'm dealing with live clients using artificial intelligence for fashion design. I'm talking with clients using data science, right, for treatment, for disease prognosis. You're talking about user experience. You're talking about, what does edge computing allow you to do? And these are just real world business problems that are going to get solved. And increasingly, they will all depend a lot on STEM, right? And how you apply STEM. So I think the first big thing is we don't orient how the world has changed around STEM, starting from school and universities, and make STEM fashionable. People, when they think of STEM, they feel it's boring, it's coding and it's technology and it's for the geeks. No, no, no. I have a fantastic, and Rashmi would tell you the same, and Ankita told you the same. We have a fantastic time dealing with STEM. So I think first and foremost that is the case. Second is, if you look at some universities abroad, guys, the disciplines are no longer as straightforward. You're not going to do just engineering, or you're not going to do just liberal arts. You're not going to do just, it's a combination of a lot of things. So I don't think the world is going to be the same anymore, right? I mean, I think it is as the distinction between business and technology is blurring. having that foundation where you understand the basics of tech, tomorrow you may be actually dealing with tech without knowing what you're dealing with, because the interface itself is so smart. So I think one of the primary reasons is that we don't see the applications of STEM being explained very well, and that's why we see and second is probably the upbringing. I mean, I think the prejudices, the stereotypes that exist, but this generation is going to bust it all. I feel very confident.
Thank you. Do any other panelists have any point to add to that?
I mean, I will just add where Lula was going, where it is interdisciplinary increasingly. So I think what students coming into the workforce or looking at opportunities need to think broadly, not just STEM. You need to know STEM, but go try other things. There's Steve Jobs in his book at one point said he did a calligraphy course and he never thought how he was going to use it, but that's what went into the first fonts that he built for Apple. Who would have thought the connection between calligraphy and computer fonts, right? So just recognize that the new innovation is in that interdisciplinary zones increasingly. So the more you equip yourself to do it, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah.
I've got something, and it's a slightly different perspective than Rashmi and Lula. And I'll start off with this fact that 70% of the NatureHealers.life team is women. And I think the women are doing a great job at what they're doing. And however, the reason why there is a perception that STEM has less women as we go higher and higher is because when we look at STEM, we end up looking at the T and E, which is technology and engineering. But it's also science and mathematics. So for example, in our company, we're a mobile app. We are technology enabled, but there is a lot of element of climate science, a lot of element of behavioral science and psychology that goes into it. All of this is science as well. And these are the fields that I think women enjoy more. And I really think women should do what they enjoy more.
Yeah, I agree. And Naini, I'd just like our viewers, and I know we are probably close on time here, with two things, right? Again, as learnings from our journey so far. Number one, people struggle with this conversation about balance. How do I balance work and life? And is tech going to be a hard career? Because as I was asking my son, why do you think your colleagues in your college, they're just headed out to university now, did not pick engineering? And he says it's a hard life, and they said it's going to be a hard career. But there's nothing called balance. It's about the choices you make, and every choice comes with some preparation and some anticipation. So guys, if you choose something, it would have its own pros and cons, and so be mindful of that. I think that is the first thing I would leave you with. And the second one, again, I read somewhere and it really stuck with me. I think it was the CEO of YouTube who said this: great opportunities never present themselves nicely gift wrapped with a ribbon and all that. They often appear as messy, confusing, that no one else wants to touch. Go for those. I think, that is what I would leave you with.
Thanks a lot, Ankita, Lula, and Rashmi, for taking time out and being here with us today. It was very insightful and we thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Naini. I think this was a great discussion, Rashmi, Lula. I think the insights that we had from you, and I am so much more junior to you both, and I think most of them were like mind blown kind of stuff. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
For having us.
In the group. So thanks for having us here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much to the Lead and Inspire panel. Those were some great insights. It's definitely something I'm going to take forward in my career. So now I would like to welcome Parul, who will be moderating the Tech Connect panel. Over to you, Parul.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Meloni. Hello, everyone. Technology today is making rapid advancements, making inroads in almost all fields in the world. We are inspired by all the wonderful people who are applying the power of technology to make our lives better. We are very, very excited to host three exceptionally accomplished women today. Miriam Daniel from BITS 90 batch, the Vice President of Echo and Alexa devices at Amazon, Maitri Ganpati, Product Leader at Google from Bits 91 batch, and Reva Modi from Bits 90 batch, who is an enterprise cloud architect at Google. Thank you for being here with us today. Let us start off by knowing your journeys till date. Maitri, could you tell us about how you reached your position of a product leader at Google?
Sure. Thank you, Parul. And super honored to be here with Kartika and with Reva. Actually, not too different in terms of journeys, at least how I started out from what we heard from the previous panel as well. I completed my undergraduate at Pilani, went on to do a master's in the US. But to shorten the journey, I spent pretty much my entire career in 3 organizations around the world. But I was fortunate to work in many different careers. So I did coding, I did product management, I did research, program management in general. And I think what happened because of that variety of different projects and focus areas that I decided to go and jump into, I developed a lot of different expertise areas that somehow all seem to meld together. Don't ask me how, but in the projects that I ended up working, it all seemed to make sense, right? So I, developed expertise in AI, there was data analytics, building cloud scale services, and interestingly enough, a lot of focus on user experience design. But I think the important thing that kind of after my first decade or so, right, what really struck for me was that I was able to build teams that develop new domain expertise with a very high focus on delivering business impact fairly strongly. And I think this happened because, folks like Lula and Rashmi and Ankita called out, I took many high-risk opportunities. Like many of these projects, because a lot of them were cutting edge, it was high potential for failure. And somehow that didn't bother me as much. So I jumped in, I said, yeah, I'll do it. But I did fail, right? And I think what helped me was that I had a number of mentors who explained to me, hey, failure is all good, but you also want to have a balance of success and failure, right? So I had these people to lean on that also kind of guided me into saying, you may want to try this other project or this other focus area and not only something like what you're doing right now. So that was, a big kind of second phase of my career journey that made a big difference in, moving on into more leadership roles and being able to do that successfully. But I just wanted to share that what also helped me a lot was that in addition to my tech career, I've always been strongly motivated to work with the community of women in tech. And so I've been working, with the Anita Borg Institute, with the Grace Hopper Conference, with ACM in India. And I actually started the Grace Hopper India conference with a small group of dedicated volunteers in 2010. So I think these experiences and I think all these people that I said helped me, these together is really what helped me get to where I am today.
Okay. Miriam, could you go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. And going after that great leadership panel that you just did is a tough act. But we'll see how we can complement what all of those great women in leadership conveyed back to you. My journey actually started, of course, after BITS Pilani. I completed computer science there. And then worked for a year in India in Tata Consultancy. It was a campus job that I got and moved into that in Chennai, India. And then surprisingly, I actually moved to a place called Louisville, Kentucky, which is like right in the middle of the US. It was a place right out of the text, the novels and books that we've read with horse farms and things. It was beautiful. But I did a lot of software engineering jobs there in different capacities. And about 5-6 years into that, I actually moved into the West Coast in California for a job with Intel. And I actually ended up staying at Intel for 14 years. And then one fine day applied to Amazon and surprisingly, they gave me a job. And now I've been at Amazon for about 7.5 years. And this the part of the journey that was exciting is, I didn't do a lot of programming in college. Let me be honest. I was doing computer science, but as Reva will attest to it, I had a lot of help from a lot of friends, and got through this degree, but learned a lot on the job. As Rashmi was telling you all earlier, it was all of the analytical skills, the logical and critical thinking, the problem solving skills that you pick up through your educational years that you later apply in different roles. I learned to code on the first mainframes in TCS, learned to, the first client server technology, taught myself that when I went into, Kentucky and started doing a lot of different software jobs. When I went to Intel, it was the move to Oracle and a lot of, I would say, web-based cloud service, kind of development. And when in Intel, I actually got the opportunity to go and work on the first laptops, which were wireless. So the first Centrino laptops, which untethered everyone. We didn't have to sit on a desk with a cable. And then I worked on the first mobile chipsets there. Again, another good opportunity learning about the mobile industry and the phone industry. And after coming to Amazon, working on the first voice technology and bringing AIs into some, anthropomorphic form that everybody can relate to, in the world around us. So every one of these has been a new journey. Everything has been a new frontier that you have to go teach yourself, and you have to learn and adapt. You have to take what you've done before and apply it to a completely new space. And that's one of the things you'll probably see in common with all of us, that, and the others have spoken about it already. You just have to say yes a lot, okay? And you don't know what the outcome is. You don't know how it's going to turn out. You have to go with your instincts a lot of times. And sometimes there are people around you can lean on to tell you whether you're making the right choices, but nobody can guarantee the outcome for you. So you just have to feel it. You have to go based on your instinct, take a different role or get into a new space and give it a shot. That's been my journey all along. And there've been failures. I don't know if any of you know that Amazon tried to build a phone called the Fire Phone, which was a big failure, and I was part of that as well. But then we doubled back up and we said, we're going to go build voice technologies next. And that became a hit. So you're going to have failures and successes, but go with your instincts, find what you're passionate about and make those leaps in your career.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. Reva, how about you? Can you tell us about your journey?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening in. I've been really enjoyed catching up with all the panels. And Kartika and I've essentially spent 4 years together at BITS. We were in the same class. And I can tell you that our journeys couldn't have started more differently or led to more different paths, but we're still very much women in tech. Mine, I would say, was a choice made by my parents when they saw they had a daughter. I don't know who decides that, but they said, we're going to make an engineer of this baby, right? So I'm at the gates of BITS Pilani wondering, did I actually sign up for this, right? And I really enjoyed my journey at Pilani. I'm one of the ones that actually like to study. So you could see me goating away at all hours of the day. And that comes from a book that I really appreciate, which says, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It says, the thing is beautiful, but if you know how it works, it becomes even more beautiful. So that defines me. I'm really curious about things, and that's sort of the journey that I undertook. So I am the exception that spent 7 years at TCS, where it was considered not so cool, but I was lucky. Every time that we adopted a new technology, I get picked for that project, which means that this hunger to learn worked well for me to be in incubation projects, right? So you start first, you don't know what's going on. We used to actually upload code using some dial-in mechanisms, right? And I've thoroughly enjoyed the first 20 years of my career
as a technology consultant, worked extensively with customers across TCS, Infosys, and Accenture. And that's when I realized that my strength lies in actually interpreting problems and figuring out the right blocks of architecture to solve them. And this feeds that curiosity of going broad, learning about different things, and saying, somehow, when you're in the zone, it'll all come together. I would say this to myself if I was to go back, choose more, which means that for the first 10 years of my career, I got lucky to be picked for projects that furthered my interest and my career, right? I made those choices without realizing. But a decade later, I was like, is this who I'm going to be? Like, if this is my headline, what would I like it to be? And I realized that this wasn't what I was going to be. I wasn't just going to be a person that traveled from a customer to another customer and essentially solve project problems. I wanted to be more, and I couldn't define the shape of more. So that's when my mentors at Accenture really helped me, and they gave me a mantra that I absolutely stick by now. I'd never pick up the same role twice in a row in an 18-month span. So there's a check mark for me saying it's 18 months in. Even if I'm doing the same role, I must solve a different problem. And that's just been fantastic, right? So whether the project succeeds or fails, you grow, you learn, and you really enjoy the journey. After Accenture, I realized the whole world was doing two things which I was missing out on. I had the .com era success and failures, and then I was looking at all the apps and the startups and saying, I want to be part of that. And I decided to go work for a mid-sized company in India and ran a product team as a VP of product engineering. I think 20 years of my enterprise career didn't prepare me for those 2 years. I basically aged reverse. I did things in a very immature fashion, and I learned how to solve quickly, right? It's a completely different skill to being risk averse, right? And everybody on the floor, the development floor, taught me how to think fast and act quick. And I think that journey was brilliant. And then I took a 2-year break because I had gained 20 kilos in that journey. And I want to share this with you people because you're going to have to do this for yourselves, right? So it's got to be a balance of career and what you choose. And I'm back now at Google. Here in my role, I actually advise clients on how you adopt cloud. And so far, loving it, both learning about customers in India, as well as sharing with them what we can do from a cloud perspective. I really look forward to the chat today.
Thank you so much, Reva. So, on to the next question. With careers spanning as long as yours, all of you must have faced significant challenges and you must have overcome them. So, could you tell us about a few of those challenges and how you overcome them and what are the lessons that you gained out of it? Maitri, can we start with you?
Sure. I was thinking maybe I'll start with the early part of my career because there's a lot of challenges to talk about across. But you know, when one of the first jobs I started with was at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and those were the days when PwC was they had just started at this notion of a technology practice. Previously, they were known as more into accounting, financials, those kinds of things, right? So they were also kind of learning. And so they had hired me. They thought I was a great techie, but I was also expected to play an average consulting role, which actually spanned many different functions, right? So I had to lead a bunch of developers, and I literally had just finished my master's. And then I had to be a business analyst. I had to convince the client on the site that, we knew what we were talking about, and more importantly, that I knew what I was talking about. And it was super challenging. And so about 8 months into my job, I still had the job. Amazing. But, somebody in the company decided to give me good advice, mentored me, if you will, and basically said, hey, listen, there are a couple of things that are not going so well for you, and it will affect your career trajectory as you go forward, right? And the interesting part was what she called out to me was not my technology skills. It was pretty much what you would think of as the soft skills of being, a career professional. And it centered around grooming. It centered about the ability to actually, wine and dine a client, because in the consulting world that is very important. It's kind of like part of actually how you close a deal. And I didn't know things like which wine to order and which restaurant to take a client to for the best steak. And of course, the reality is, even though I went to Pilani, I was still a very, mature, shy person, and I was still figuring my way around the world, right? And so Linda, who was, giving me all of this advice, she said, I'm going to sign you up with a clothing consultant. And I'm going to sign you up for the American Sommelier Association. And you're going to take golf courses. And I was like, oh my God, I hate all of that. How am I going to do this? And she pushed hard. And she said, if you want to stay in this consulting role at least, and you want to be successful at it, you have to pay as much importance to these as to building out your technology skills and applying it. Anyway, long story short, it did make a huge difference. It was very, very painful. To this day, I have a hatred of getting onto a golf course. But those are the things that I had to push myself to go and do. And of course, I had Linda's help to do the pushing. But over the years now, I'm also more kind to myself, and I give myself credit for actually saying, yes, I will take the push that Linda gave me.
That's very insightful. Thank you. Mariam, would you like to go next?
Sure. When you start your career, you don't know anyone around you. So there's nobody to believe in you and say, you can do it, okay? And I was in this position. It was after TCS when I first came to the US. It was the time when you still had to go to a newspaper store or a bookstore. I bought newspapers from 3 different cities, circled the jobs I could apply for. And I actually first applied outside of Kentucky, like Atlanta, Seattle, some Chicago, I think, just to do practice interviews, because I was so nervous about going into a new country and trying to find a job for myself. So I gave myself 2 weeks, did a lot of practice interviews, and then I applied within the state. And I had to really, really bolster my own confidence, because that is a stage in your career where you don't have a network, you don't have a mentor, you don't have a sponsor, you don't have somebody who's taking your resume necessarily into the company. So you're a nobody. So when nobody believes in you, you have to believe in yourself. That's the very early stage of your career. Nowadays, you have a lot of social media. You have the ability to connect with a lot of people. So definitely leverage that. But even so, even if somebody's kind enough to say hello to you and get your resume in for a position, know that they don't know you personally. So you have to be the one working doubly hard to prepare yourself to get the first few opportunities. And so that's how I kind of got into this tech space. But then once you're in, right, what you will find very often is you're the only woman at the table. Okay, and you're there because you're part of the group, but not necessarily because you earned a seat at the table. So that's your next challenge. You have to, do your homework, do it really well, know your domain really well, speak with confidence. That's one of the challenges I faced. I had to do a lot of homework. I would, read through the night to prepare for a meeting in the morning. And that's the point also where, as I was taking on new technology challenges, new areas where I had to work, I actually leaned in on my Bitsian friends a lot. My batchmates might know one of our 90 batch guys, Shiva Guru. And I used to call him every day and say, I have to solve this problem. Can you give me a hint? And we used to work, nights together on the phone trying to solve problems. So lean in on your network, whoever that might be, to help you solve problems that you might never have faced before. And I did a lot of that. And slowly you start, earning credibility, earning trust with the group that's around you. And then you earn the seat at your table, right? And that actually goes on through your career, from one job to the next, one group to the next, or one company to the next. You have to still keep earning your seat at your table. Make sure that you're working hard towards that. And then the other thing I want to talk about is setbacks. you will have a lot of setbacks. Even if you're doing your best, you will have setbacks. And it could be circumstances that are out of your control. It could be things happening around you. But those are the times when, by this point in my career, I actually had a few mentors. And one of them actually told me this. She said, let's lock up your emotions and throw the key away. And now let's talk. And so when you put aside your emotions and look at the situation you're in a very pragmatic way, you will come at a few logical conclusions. There will be people to help you arrive there as well. But when you have setbacks, which all of us have had, know how to separate the emotion from what needs to be done, and then find your path and move on. And those are the things I would say. You're probably going to face these challenges all through your career. I tell you, even today, sometimes I'm the only woman in the room. I'm the only woman in a meeting. Okay, but now I don't even notice it. Okay, you will get to a point where you're so confident about yourself and what you can deliver and what you bring, your unique perspective that you bring to the table. You're so confident about it that you don't even notice that you're the only woman at the table. So I urge all of you, women in tech, in STEM, to go through that journey, lean on the people around you, have the confidence in yourself through every challenge, and get to a point where you're so confident that it doesn't matter who is around you or that you're the only woman there.
Thank you so much, Mariam. I especially remember the last few actionable tips that you said. Reva, can we start with your answer now?
So I resonate a lot with what Karthika just mentioned about the first 2 to 3 years of my career. If you had a specific problem to solve, you got really good at it because it was in a box. But the moment someone shared a problem that you hadn't heard about before, you had bad habits from college of actually saying there's actually an answer someone else has created. And when you get to work, you realize that's not always true. Some of these problems will be first-time ones. There may be solutions, similar sounding ones with your colleagues on the floor, or now you guys have Google, but you will still be faced with a lot of these challenges which you will not recognize. One of the challenges that I didn't recognize was, even if I knew the answer and I solved the problem, if I didn't represent it myself, people wouldn't know who actually did it. And it wasn't that someone was trying to keep me away from presenting, but every time that you take a second to respond saying, I will present, somebody else is going to do that, because guess what? It is a competitive world. So what I learned early on when I got setbacks where all of my work was getting represented by equally competent people, but they just chose to raise their hands and say, yes, I will present in a meeting. And so I learned to do that too late, I would say. And so now what I suggest to everybody is, when you're in a meeting, prepare beforehand, as Karthika suggested. What is it about? What do you think about it, right? You can either lead the discussion or you can conclude, right? But you must have a perspective. And this is expected of all of us very early as well. You might think as a developer, who's going to ask you that question? But guess what? You might be in a design review meeting and you have an idea, you must speak up. Right? So that was my first sort of quote unquote setback, which is letting things just be without speaking up. I would say the second challenge that I had to overcome was my love for black and white. I loved problems being defined clearly, right? And trust me, that is not the way the world works, right? So every single person that we've heard on the panel before, and everyone that's doing well will tell you this: the more you learn to deal with gray, the more bigger problems you get to solve, right? So if you have a love for black and white, that's great. That's a strength. But what you need to learn to do is take gray and make it black and white, right? Ask questions, get to the problem, right? So my challenge was transitioning from someone who knew how to do a specific thing to learning to understand how to get wider in my scope, right? And that is again a transition. Your head, heart, everything has to change, right, to deal with gray. And what I would say would be my sort of biggest setback or challenge is, every time that I was doing well at something, I got interested in something completely different. So my zone of being, right, didn't come together as often as it ought to. So what does that mean? that if my job was not enough for me, I should have spoken up and taken on a different role, saying this is done and I need to do something else, right? And now that I've learned to do that, it goes in better for me. And last but not the least, it's just your network, right? Whether it is your team, it's your colleagues, or it is your college mates. And as Kartika said, most of us will go back to someone in the batch when we're faced with very tough interviews, when we have a moment where we've never been before, right? So for me, the Google interview, for example, was something that was, it's a place I want to be. It's like you coming out of college and thinking, wow, I am going to be at Google. And that was a moment when I realized my classmates were my best friends to test out what works, what doesn't. And so build that network, invest your time in finding your mentors and your friends. It really helps all of us in both our highs and lows. So.
Wow. Thank you, all of you. As a fresher who's just joined the corporate world, I think I learned a lot out of the answers. So, next up, since all of you are working at the forefront of cutting edge technology in AI and in cloud, and all of you are driving major innovations today, we would like to know how all of you visualize the future of tech and how you see it evolving in the near future. So, let's start with Maitri.
Yeah, well, that's a hard order, Parul. I don't know if I am qualified to say how I see the entire, surface of tech evolving. But I do want to share something that is, of deep interest to me. I've worked a little bit in it, and interestingly, it's not something that's new. It's basically this concept of how you create a neural interface, basically an interface between the brain and the external world. Many names for it. And I believe people started working on it as early as the 1950s, much like, AI actually started in that time itself. But more recently, I don't know how many of you read the news or are following these trends, but, like Facebook announced that it wanted to create a device that can read your mind. And right now, I think they're still at really around, 50 to 60%, but it's pretty impressive that they are that far ahead, right? And basically what they're trying to do is pick up thoughts directly from your neuron and translate it into words. And of course, Mr. Elon Musk isn't far behind. He has his fingers in many pies. I think his company is called Neuralink. And I don't quite know how it works, but what I've understood is that they're thinking of implanting threads into your brain, and these are obviously biotechnological interfaces. And with that, you'll be able to control devices, like, answer your phone or your computer or instruct, basically, right? So it's kind of similar, but the purpose was slightly more specific. Now, this is still very early stage, despite, this work starting as early as 1950s. One of the problems with neural interfaces is that you have to create essentially a bioelectronic device, and it has to have sufficient insulating material. And a lot of the ideas now, at least, is about embedding. Facebook's way of thinking about it is it'll be an external device. But then that embedded device, if they look at it in that route, it has to be able to interact with a specific tissue area, like if you imagine that in your brain. And then you have to have conductive materials that carry that signal back, right, to whichever is the receiving device. And so many issues really is about this poor bioincompatibility of these devices. So I don't see it as being too far away. This whole world of micro nanotechnologies that is really gathering up speed because of many things, right? Of course, cloud computing made a huge difference. Just bringing trillions of data points into the cloud and being able to process that in under milliseconds and sending signals back into devices like that has helped a lot. So I feel like this is one of those areas that if we can take it forward, obviously as an industry, it has huge potential. It also has huge risk because if people like Facebook are successful, the question that arises is how much of your thoughts then become private? How do you tell the machine that is reading your thoughts that I don't want you to listen to this fantasy in my brain, I only want you to listen to this instruction that I want to give to somebody or record on the computer, right? I don't know how, machines will get savvy about that, and what will be this blurred line of privacy, which is already blurred, but it gets more blurred, so to speak. But if done well, I believe then these neural interfaces have the ability to solve many, many problems, right? Mainly around, allowing people with epilepsy to talk, that is, or people that have, different kinds of paralysis, potentially people who have Alzheimer's. And just, the ability, like if you are now developing much more complicated, let's say, instruments of flight, could be a space rocket, much like, what Mr. Branson went up in recently. But how can you control that without having to be at the dashboard, but, do that with, your own thoughts, right? So there's a lot of complexity and problem solving that neural interfaces can solve. But, I just hope it happens in the order of decades and not in the order of, another 50 years.
Okay, thank you so much, Maitri. That's a lot of food for thought. Mariam, how do you visualize the future of technology?
Almost everything I say could be wrong, so I'll start with that caveat. But the way I've seen technology evolving is that in the last couple of decades, technology has evolved for sure. In order to, but we've had to learn new technologies. We had to learn, how to use app, from keyboards to apps on phones. Now people are using voice, different interaction paradigms. But I actually think the next 10, 20 years, technology will adapt to humans. It will be in the reverse because technology is getting smarter. And so, it will adapt to what humans want more than humans having to learn new technology. Like, I think that'll be the shift. And what does that really mean? For example, Maitri talked about privacy. Everybody's getting, conscious and aware of security and privacy now, which means, we might see a swing from, cloud computing to more edge computing because everything is staying close to you and hence more secure and more private. So that might be, again, it's human beings wanting privacy because we've swung the other way. The pendulum always swings, and now they will swing the other way, saying, rather than put my entire life in a public spotlight, I want to be private about something. So there will be technologies that help you with that. There will be we call them AIs or artificial intelligence, Alexa, Siri, Google, and there'll be many, many more, that will come about. They will all coexist, just like you have a plumber to do plumbing work and a doctor for your medical care. I think AIs will become specialists too. They will be good at each AI will be good at something. And you will be calling upon them to do, some special purpose thing that they're really, really good at. Maybe you always ask Google to search for something, and you always ask Alexa to buy something for you, or to do something in your house and make it smarter. So every AI will start becoming specialists, I think, instead of being generalists. I also think your homes will get smarter, and that trend is just starting. And so, some of the things that you're seeing in sci-fi can actually become a reality in your homes. After all, Alexa was started based on, seeing the Star Trek computer in Star Trek. And so now, you can actually talk to such a computer. So I'm hoping that our homes get smarter in that way. But most importantly, I think technology will become more sustainable. That's also, the green awareness is increasing. Tech companies are investing in sustainability. So, all your tech gadgets which you're throwing away will probably become recyclable or curbside recyclable. We'll probably build more things with recycled plastics. We will be more energy conscious and put more clean energy on the grid. So I think a lot of, humans asking for these things is actually changing the way technology is transforming.
Oh, thank you so much, Mariam. This was a really good answer. Reva, can you talk about how you visualize the evolution of technology?
I resonate with what Kartika said actually. The way we see, and mine's closer in view in terms of if I look at what's happening over the next 5 years, right? We're literally just putting in the plumbing right now, right? And that means that when you read all about data or AI, where's the reality at? Like, who actually has it? It's only the ones that have the billion user use cases, right? They are the only ones who actually gone the whole hog. Enterprises are just beginning the journey, right? So if you were to ask me, have we won the data battle? Has AI actually entered all of our lives? And I would say no, we're just beginning. So to me, it'll go from where it is, which is a novelty, and we actually talk about it, to you expecting it to be everywhere. Like today, you don't look at touchscreen and think, oh, novelty. You expect there to be a touchscreen, and that's where all of us are going from solving business problems, from anybody else that is actually using an application. You expect the application, or the business to understand what it must do next. The expectation is not from AI, the expectation is from the experience, right? So when you're banking, you're expecting a recommendation that is equivalent to having a best friend within that system, and you're expecting these AI technology to solve for you, and you're collecting data right now to be able to do that for everybody, right? And this is happening across pharma, it's happening across every industry, where you talk to a customer and you'll actually have business people talk to you and say, look, I actually want a better way of servicing this request, or I want to predict what it's going to be like. So for me, that maturity is very much sort of within reach now, that the amount of adoption that's going on. The second one around interfaces, right? I can't even imagine having to look at a screen in 10 years. Like, I'm hoping what I need will come to me at the interface that I need it at, right? So I'm a huge fan of the Hindi version of Alexa. I adore her personality, and that's a telling moment for me, which is that I adapt to it as if that moment is between me and a friend. And I think all of us, while wanting more privacy, the generation that you people are, the kids, are actually one with technology more than we are, right? So for you, moving seamlessly between devices and experiences, the whole gaming experiences that you're actually going through, it's life. You don't think of it as a separate thing, right? So the interfaces that you will design will surprise us, and I hope delight us as well. So that's the second one. Two questions that will need very different answers are cybersecurity, the scale at which data is being collected, the scale at which people are interacting with technology. We have to actually scale our security practices in that manner, and that's a very different kind of problem to solve, as opposed to what people do today, which is put guardrails, right? Now, all the larger platforms actually use AI to actually do threat prevention detection, and that will go whole hog. Um, Last but not the least, the debates on ethics are just going to heat up, right? We are now going to have to face, and we do that a lot, right? Every time you do a AI use case, you're going to be asked, is this going to be harmful to a human being? And I remember reading Asimov and thinking, wow, we're actually at that moment where we're saying, are we solving the right problems for the right reasons? So I see this coming together over the next 5 years.
Wow. Thank you so much, Reva. Thank you so much, all of you, for all of these exciting ideas. I mean, when they do come to action, we'll remember that you said it first. And so we're now coming to the end of the conference, and I'd like to ask all of you one last question. If you could give one advice to the younger generation right now, what would it be? Let's start with you, Maitri.
I think, to coin the title of a book that I'm still reading, it is The Courage to be Disliked. When I think throughout my career, maybe less so in the last 5 years or so, I've always tried to blend in with the team and the leaders that I'm interacting with, as opposed to taking a very sharp position and or presenting myself sharply in contrast, right? That doesn't mean I compromised and agreed with what they wanted, but I knew that I was not my personality, right? And of course, that came with a lot of different pressures, right? As I'm sure all the women who spoke before and now will relate to, you get labeled and you get judged because technically you're still a minority and the majority has the ability to label and judge you. And a lot of us are not happy with the labels that we get, right? Where you should have been said as being innovative and risk-taking, you get labeled as being a failure. Or where you think you're being assertive and making a point, you get labeled as aggressive. Where you want to be empathetic and resonate with the other person, you get labeled as emotional. And so I'm not saying that there may not have been some underpinnings of truth in all of those labels, but ideally what you want is that the label to be positively spun and not negatively, right? And these are the challenges that I used to face. And I always sensed that I was kind of moving with the water of that force that I was being facing, as opposed to standing ground, right? And in the last 5 years or so, I think I've found a way to stand my ground and still do it in a way that I now feel, at least retrospectively, hasn't been as harsh or compromising for either party. That took a while, but it also took conversation. It took, again, allies to stand up and tell me, this is how you were perceived. This is maybe how you want to say things differently. But it's okay to be who you are. And I think that's the biggest learning I would ask all of you to think about much early on. Because I feel like, the impact that you would have and potentially your career trajectory as well is probably 2x or 4x if you can figure out how to be yourself, but still figure out how to blend in with who you're working with. So that's my advice.
Thank you, Maitri. Mariam, would you like to go next?
I'd like to leave you all with two things. First is, you're so early in your careers, in your journeys. Think of everything as two-way doors. I want you all to know the concept of one-way doors and two-way doors. Everything you do now, is reversible. If you don't like something, you can change course. If you, find that you get into a job and that's not the right thing for you, you're not passionate about it, you can go find a passion somewhere else. So, think of everything as two-way doors and don't, unnecessarily obsess over a major decision that you think is a one-way door. Almost everything you do now is reversible, except don't get in trouble, okay? But outside of that can have long-term consequences. But outside of that, I would say, as you're making your choices, there's a lot of two-way doors. You have a lot of option value. So, put your foot out there, and take a risk. And if you don't like it, you can always change course. The one other thing I'd like to leave you all with is, if you're getting into STEM, I hope we've inspired you to get into STEM. Know that, technology is by itself is not useful. It is developed to make human lives better. Okay, so don't get caught up with building things just for the sake of building things. Always ask, how does it make a human life better? How does it make your customer's life better? Start with that experience and work backwards into whatever you need to invent or build as technology. Then you will always find your purpose. Otherwise, you may never find that North Star or the purpose you're looking for. So always remember that the intention of technology is to make human lives better.
Thank you, Mariam. Reva, would you like to go next?
Sure. My three things to remember in the next 5 years, right? It'll change what you need to do. The first one is, you actually really have to work hard at becoming good at something, right? And this is the time where you build your foundation. So what I'm trying to say is, find the one thing that you want to stick by and invest time in learning it, in practicing, in using it. And you will find that it actually transfers to everything you will do later, because you learned how to learn. And trust me, all of us will tell you this, we learned when we worked, right? And that's when the muscle memory developed. The second one is, take risks. Always put your hand up to say, I'm going to be the one who is going to take a shot at this problem. It will help you to accept failures early, because you realize that without trying something, you're never going to know if you can or if you can't. And you would have heard that in everybody's stories, and more so with Kartika, right? Just in your second year of work to change a country and to find a job. So that's what I'm not saying you need to quit your job, but if there's a project somebody offers that is risky, that doesn't make full sense to you, sign up for it, because that's going to be your best learning ground. And the third one, just build your network. It's very, very important. As your careers are going to last really long, you're going to need mentors and friends who are going to help you get through this journey.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Reva. We are now at the end of the talk. Thank you so much, Maitri, Mariam, and Reva, for taking out your time and for addressing us all. We learned a lot, and this was very inspiring. And I would now like to hand over to Meloni.
Thank you so much, Reva, Maitri, and Miriam. I think this is a really good time for us young folks to be in tech. It's very exciting. I hope the audience also feels the same excitement as I am feeling. With this, our conference comes to an end. We are very grateful to the panelists for taking out time on a Sunday to give us some words of motivation and guidance. We hope that you'll have been inspired by learning about the various career paths and the options that you have in the future. We wish you all the best in your journeys. To meet more Bitsian women, you can follow the Women of Bits Instagram page. To meet young women in STEM, you can follow the STEM4elle Twitter account. And if you want to be updated about various opportunities for women, be sure to follow the Bits Goa Women in Tech Insta page. All links are in the description. Thank you and good night.